So it's been about 2 months since the big extended gameplay reveal of Bloodlines 2, and I haven't really spoken about it since then, and the reason why is there's been literally nothing to talk about since that reveal, which I'd say was overall underwhelming. I don't think it's as bad as maybe I expected, where I thought they didn't even have a game, really. They were just showing off concept art and little screenshots and things like that. But they did show something. But it wasn't what we wanted in a Bloodlines 2. It was literally just a linear sort of level. It was the same location that they repeated 3 times over with a little NPC interaction at the end. But it was literally all combat. The dialogue system, it was simpler than even Fallout 4, Mass Effect, for instance. It was really dumbed down. It was nothing like the original game, and in fact, since that reveal and now, I've actually done a full replay of Bloodlines 1. I'm not really a massive replayer of games, I do like new experiences, but I did want to replay it just to familiarize myself with how excellent the original was. So I played it a couple of times years and years ago, and it was great. It still holds up really well. It's certainly not a flawless game by any means, but the strengths of the title, there's none of that in the new Bloodlines, at least from what we've seen. And since that reveal trailer, what have they been doing? It's dev diaries, clan highlights, woohoo, and I can't even really take you through these, because if I jump into one of them, it's just boring text. A lot of it is screenshots we've either seen before, or they're all basically just combat related. And I've got to say, I don't think I've seen a game, or at least a sequel to a revered series, that has had this little hype going for it. There is zero hype. No one seems to be looking forward to it. There's like a handful of copers, which I'll show you in a second, but just about everyone's just lost all interest, and it's really apathy at this point. I believe before they really showed it off, the Chinese room showed off the game, there was a lot more talk, because some people were saying it's going to be the worst thing in the world. Some people were saying, no, you're just being negative, you're being cynical, no, you're all toxic, it's going to be incredible. Both parties have basically walked away now, because there was nothing for anyone. It wasn't sort of so bad that you can sit there and laugh at it. It's just that it's not a Bloodlines game by any means. It seems to be 90% combat with some talking in between the levels. That's about it. And I really don't know if there's going to be hubs, because playing the original Bloodlines, the hubs are just fantastic to explore. There's 4 of them. Some of them are better than others. As many know, the original Bloodlines had a troubled, rushed development. It was published by Activision, who pushed the game out. Troika Games, who made it. Industry veterans like Tim Kaine, many others who were at that studio. They're fantastic. Tim Kaine made the original Fallout. Great people working there, a lot of talent, but they did have to rush that game out. So the first half is really good, and it's funny because where the game sort of falls away a little bit and isn't quite as fun is when you get thrown into these extended combat sessions. For instance, there's a period of the game where you're forced to go down some sewers and you spend like an hour just going through like a dungeon combat. But to be honest, the combat in the game, it's not that great, especially if you're focusing on maybe melee or guns, at least from my experience. Not the greatest thing in the world. Where the game excels is when you're walking around hubs, which are like towns, cities, and you're engaging with people. You're having interesting conversations, cool quests, often a bit of reactivity. It's really, really interesting. But it seems like with Bloodlines 2, they've just gone all in on the combat, which is odd. That is what was least memorable about the original, and that's what you're doing. And it really just seems like to me that this team isn't making a Bloodlines game. I mean, I can't even hold the Chinese room to account that much. I really believe it's the publisher that is to blame, Paradox, because they had Hardsuit Labs, the original developer of this, working on it. And so many people are nostalgic about their version now. I mean, Brian Mitsoda was working on it, so maybe the story side of things could have worked, given Brian was the brains behind the original. They fired him, the whole thing's a disaster. Now it's sitting with the Chinese room. And I honestly think that the Chinese room just wanted to make something totally different. They just wanted to make a linear vampire game, maybe a bit of dialogue here and there, but that's kind of what that studio is known for. They mostly make walking simulators. Even having combat is kind of new for them, and sure, they've hired new people to work on the project who have combat experience, but they're not making a full-fledged RPG that does have those hubs and places to explore. I'd be very shocked by that. In fact, one of the reasons this is so sad that since the gameplay reveal, all we've gotten is these diaries, is I'm pretty sure this is all we're going to get until at least June. The game is meant to come out this calendar year. So if we're expecting it, let's say November, December at the very latest, even then, we're going to get no more than that little bit of footage we got in January until the middle of the year. And that footage that we got was literally just exploring one small location, probably like 20 minutes of gameplay. Is this going to be extremely short? I mean, it doesn't have to be 100 hours long. The original wasn't, but you'd be expecting at least sort of 15, 20 hours out of this. And they've had barely more than 20 minutes of a level to show outside some screenshots and some combat. And as we go through and look at people's reactions, I found this interesting because here on a discussion board, Wesp5, he is really the person who is responsible for Bloodlines 1 being playable in 2024. When the game came out, it was a buggy mess. This person has spent like 20 years fixing it, patching it, not getting paid for it. He's done this because he was so passionate about the original title. He has no hype for the new one. I believe he even got to see some of it. Maybe it was the Hardsuit Labs version, but at some point he was shown footage of the game before the general public. So he's a revered person in the community and he is not hyped in the least. He says here, why is everybody comparing what we've seen of Bloodlines 2 with Dishonored? That is a comparison that came up a lot during the January gameplay reveal. The latter, Dishonored, had melee weapons, ranged weapons, and magic spells. For now, Bloodlines 2 shows punching people in different ways, nothing more. I mean, that's true. I've seen a lot of people suggest that Bloodlines 2 is going to be like an immersive sim. It's going to be the next Deus Ex, Dishonored, Thief, any of those games. And it really isn't. I mean, those games excelled often because of the level design. There were often multiple ways to tackle the level. Plus, you had the gameplay. You could stealth it. You could go in guns blazing, combat, lots of ways to approach those titles. But Bloodlines 2 does not look to be that. It seems like it's just mostly punching. Maybe you can do a little bit of stealth, but it doesn't seem like there's many mechanics there. Seems really, really basic. And then there's some talking at the end of the level. It's going to be so simple. This is not a AAA game by any means. It's got a small budget, and it's being rushed because Paradox lost so much money with Hardsuit Labs. The whole selling point for getting Chinese Room onto the title was that they could get it out quickly. And I mentioned Chinese Room's not really to blame. I don't think they made that decision. They have an owner, Sumo Digital, who I believe promised Paradox that they could get a game out quickly. So Chinese Room, maybe there's some idiots who work there who don't really like the original audience and see the Bloodlines name as getting in the way of just making what they want to make. I mean, I'm not excusing them for that, but I don't think they're really the main villains here. It's more so Paradox. The game's just not going to be good, but it's not all the Chinese Room's fault. It's the expectations of the Bloodlines name. If this was just a random Vampire the Masquerade game, there's heaps of duds video games that have made with that IP. It's just that Bloodlines is revered, so there's more expectations, which is fair. You're cashing in on that name and you're doing a terrible job. If we go to the Vampire Masquerade subreddit, there was a time when discussion was reasonably positive, and this is a fairly active board. There's 35,000 plus members, and what I've noticed over the last couple of months is discussion went from all talking about the sequel to now 90% of the posts are just talking about the original and being nostalgic for it. And when there is a post about the new game, it's something like this: why do you all already hate Bloodlines 2? Recent screenshots actually look kind of promising, and I'm curious to see what they do with the plot. A lot of RPGs have voice characters, like Mass Effect, and we haven't seen much gameplay footage. I mean, this is a straw man suggesting we hate the game because there's a voice protagonist. That's really not the main issue. The problem there is when you get a voice protagonist, that only works if you don't dumb down the whole game. If you've got a limited voice actor budget, and you decide, well, because we're paying someone to speak, now we have to make all the dialogue really, really simple and have barely any options for choosing the next dialogue choice. You're doing that because of the voice protagonist. That's when people get annoyed by it, because you've dumbed down the game just to make it more accessible by having a voiced character. I don't like that. I'd much rather rich text that really draws me in rather than just making it voiced, and then the actual quality of the content suffers. So that's the issue there, not that they're voiced. I feel like when or if the game comes out, you're all going to go into it hating it, which will inevitably lead to nitpicky criticisms. That's just me though. Well, people are not nitpicking. A lot of people, I think, were open-minded about the gameplay reveal, and people thought when they announced it, yeah, okay, they're shoving it off, let's give this a chance. I kind of did. I wasn't so negative about that gameplay reveal that it seemed like I was just hating it for the sake of it. I actually said it's better than I was expecting. I thought they did not have a game here, and this might be so embarrassing. They'd be trying to hide the fact that the game is basically a nothing and they're still trying to work on it, get it playable. I thought it could be that. No, it was playable. There was even combat, the animations, but it was just so far from what I wanted in a Bloodlines game that it wasn't even really funny to laugh at. It seemed like they were patting themselves on the back because the Chinese Room, they'd finally made a game with gameplay, not just walking around like in Dear Esther. Has everybody gone to the Rapture? I think that might be one of theirs. They were proud because now they had a game where you're not just walking around, you can actually use your fists, and there was that genuine hand-to-hand combat. But for anyone who's a Bloodlines fan, we're just thinking, this is not it. What are you doing? It's not even funny to laugh at because you've got something functional, but it's so boring that it's, again, apathy. No one's talking about it now. But again, there are some people coping. For instance, someone says in the comments here, all I'm expecting is a vampire immersive sim light. That's at least as good as Deus Ex Human Revolution. Like, is this like memory block or something? Because Human Revolution is a fantastic game. If someone released a game as good as that today, I'd be buying it full price, $70, $80. I'd be extremely happy. That was an incredible title. Maybe not quite as good as the original classic game, but so good. This is not going to be anywhere near that. No matter how optimistic you could be, no. If it was half as good as Human Revolution, I'd be impressed. That is not happening here. I'm not sure why people are having that expectation. Like, that game had great level design, hubs to explore. This seems to be linear levels, maybe a room to do fighting in, and that's about it. I don't care what people say. I'm a vampire fan, so I'm going to play this game to death. If it isn't great, the fan base will fix it up, just like they did with Bloodlines 1. I just wanted it released finally so I can see it for myself. Now, again, this is people who don't really understand what fixing Bloodlines 1 actually meant. Bloodlines 1 was basically a full game in terms of combat. Again, later in the title, it's not quite as good. For instance, you get to Chinatown, the last hub, there's way less content than in previous hubs. It's less interesting. But most of the great content that we remember was there, ready to go. It was just a little bit buggy and glitchy. It took someone like 20 years, basically, to really feel like the game was bug-free, and it mostly worked. And even still now, like, you get stuck in things, you try and open an event and go through, it doesn't always work, so it's far from perfect. But that was it, fixing bugs, basically, getting things working. The idea that they're going to release a dud of a game where the characters suck, the levels suck, the systems are not really RPG systems, they're not fit for purpose. The idea that someone's just going to fix that, the fans will fix that, no, you'd be better off making a brand new game, which someone's kind of doing. I saw something quite cool where there's a total conversion of Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, I think it's called, and they're modding that into Skyrim. It's, again, not perfect by any means. It's probably looks a bit too Skyrim-y, less sort of vampire, but it's still quite nice. It looks better than what the Chinese Room is doing. So that's probably a more realistic fan expectation, that someone can make something brand new in, say, the Skyrim engine, which is easier to mod with. That is absolutely not going to happen with Bloodlines 2. If it's a dud, no one's going to spend any time on it. Think about Starfield. The modders have deserted that game because the base sucks. It's not worth trying to polish a turd. It's hopeless. And someone actually has desperately tried to keep the positivity coming. So we see here low sodium Bloodlines, and some people may remember, I think it's low sodium Starfield, where they had to make their own Reddit, their own discussion board to discuss the game positively, because in the regular Starfield subreddit, everyone was just bagging on the game, making fun of it. Someone's trying to do this with Bloodlines. Hey everyone, popped open a new subreddit for people who want to discuss or follow the new Bloodlines game, and discuss the old without some of the toxicity that is getting spammed here every day. Now, to most of these people, toxicity means that you're not sucking up to the game, you're not sucking up to the devs, and you're just blindly saying everything's incredible without any constructive criticism. When people say toxicity, that's usually what they mean. The goal is to have positive discussion, constructive criticism of what we see, and generally just discuss without the immense amount of salt around here. Once again, no one's really that salty anymore. Most people are just, yep, we're accepting the new game's not going to be what we want, it's not going to work out, people are already looking to the future. I hope one day someone makes a genuine Bloodlines sequel, because number 2 is definitely not going to be it. So if that's your definition of salt, by all means. And I don't care if people want to discuss the game positively, that's fine. However, it seems to be a total dud. This low sodium Bloodlines, there's 2 people online talking about it, and you go through the threads, there's a couple from the last few days, but then you have to go like 2-3 weeks ago. Your hopes for the music in Bloodlines 2. Now, the original's got good music, but when this is what you're talking about now, like the characters are terrible, everything looks bad, maybe we can get some positivity around the music. That's when you know things are not looking so dire, when that's the best you can talk about. And you're going back sort of 3-4 weeks. So barely anyone is discussing this positively, even though there is a place to do it. What I will do, though, is look at some of these new screenshots. So some of these were posted in the latest dev diary. As usual, we get a one-liner from Fire. Never any interesting dialogue. It's always super simple. And then we've got the combat-related screenshots once again. So there's never anything about hubs, genuine exploration, talking to interesting new characters. We've seen like 3 NPCs. The Nosferatu, I think there's the old lady that we can see here on the website, and then that's about it. I think there's the lady from the old trailers who had her tits heavily reduced, and that's really it. But again, the new screenshots, all combat. They seem totally impressed by their combat system. Nothing else. Again, replayed Bloodlines 1. It was a great time. The combat was not what I remember fondly about it. The combat was at best serviceable. At least for me, this time when I played it, I focused a lot on guns, because I remember playing it years ago where I went in with no prior knowledge, and I thought, oh, I always love it in these RPGs where I can focus on persuasion or hacking or lockpicking and these other skills, and I didn't do a lot on the combat side, and then I found out that the last half of the game is almost all combat. So this time I made sure to focus on combat skills, and that way I was able to get through it and see it from less of a frustrated perspective, because last time I had low combat skills, this time I was fine, but it was still kind of boring. Just shoot everything that moves, great, move on. For me, it was still those interactions, exploring these locations. So many incredible side quests as well, and even these characters that have a great reputation now, like Damsel, for instance, she gets talked about a lot. I mean, she's not actually in the game that much. It's like these characters are there, but they don't overuse them. You do a quest or 2 with them, and it's great. They are extremely memorable characters, but then you're moving on to someone new. So there's always something like that happening. I feel like with a Bloodlines 2, there's barely going to be any NPCs, and if they bring back any old ones, it's just going to be fan service. It's not going to feel that great. There was also, I'll actually bring it up here, it's the Tremere abilities. So this is the skill tree. Something about it just looks bland and just uncreative, and it's actually worse than it looks at first glance, because they sell this as the Tremere skill tree. That seems to be what they're going for. And we can see, what, like 20 skills here or something. But then if you read this note, it says, ability tree for Tremere with all clan abilities and the clan perk are unlocked. An ability from Banu Hakim branch has been equipped, replacing recall. If I'm reading that correctly, that means that this image is literally every single clan's abilities on the one screen. This isn't one clan's abilities where you get 20 and then another clan's got another 20. This is absolutely everything. Which means that you can only pick 5 skills across the game, it looks like. And considering every skill that's available in Bloodlines 2 appears to be combat-related, maybe there's some others, but it's not like Bloodlines 1, where you've got, again, hacking, lockpicking, all these other ones, bartering, all these cool things. It seems like you pick 5 skills across the game instead. I've lost count of the amount of times that I opened up the menu to level something up in the original. I was always doing that. It's a heap of fun. You're going down different paths, really interesting. 5 abilities here. And they're trying to sort of sell that for whatever reason you can occasionally pick an ability from another clan to mix and match a little bit. But this just looks so bare bones. And when this is the whole game, combat, and you pick 5 skills, how short is this game? What are we doing? There cannot be hubs. I don't believe that there's hubs in the title and you can really explore until I see them. And because we're probably getting nothing else except for these pathetic diaries, it's all text, I think someone found evidence that they're actually using ChatGPT to put these together, and again, probably patting themselves on the back. We're using AI, we're innovative. Well, thanks, but for the potential paying customer, you just look super lazy. None of this is interesting. It's really hard to pick this up and talk about it, but I wanted to because it had been a couple of months, and I was interested in seeing, is there anything here to get excited about? There isn't. Everything looks dull. I've never seen interest in a game just desert so quickly, and I'm really just expecting more of the same in June. If there's more gameplay, it's just going to be showing another combat level. If this thing's coming out this year, it's going to be a total dud, but not like, say, a Golem or a King Kong. If we go further back, Mass Effect, Andromeda, Anthem, it's not going to be like that. It's just going to come out, no one's going to give a shit, and then it's going to disappear forever. And sadly, Bloodlines, the name, could then disappear from there, and we get no new games, because the stupid people at Paradox, the publisher, they won't learn. They'll go, oh, people just aren't interested in the Bloodlines name. That's a shame. They clearly don't buy games, these so-called RPG fans. So it'll be sad if that happens, but hopefully modders can do something outside of this, and we get new creations, spiritual successors to Bloodlines somewhere else. That's probably copium, but if we're ever going to get something in the Vampire Masquerade universe again, even if it's unofficial, I think it can only come from fans. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.